Y'all did great, man. All right?
All right, you too.
Thanks for coming. Have a good one.
Okay. Okay, that was Mr. Ray Signor. Now we're gonna transition into one more football topic, or maybe two more, and then some more things. I know Nick wanted to talk about top 10 wide receivers in the Super Bowl era specifically. I have a list. At 10, I got Chris Carter. At 9, I got Marvin Harrison. At 8, I got Larry Fitzgerald. At 7, I got Julio Jones. At 6, I got Antonio Brown. I gotta give respect to guys that did it in the past. Although I don't like the pre Super Bowl era, so I don't have any guys like that. But give me Michael Irvin at 5. Won 3 championships in the '90s. Was probably the third best player, or at least top 5 player in that dynasty. Megatron, Kelvin Johnson at 4. This was really get spicy. Who I put at 3, who I put at 2, but no hot takes yet. Terrell Owens at 3. Give me Randy Moss at 2. You already know who's number 1, Jerry Rice.
Interesting list. Interesting. Disagree with pretty much all of that. So here's mine. Number 10, Julio Jones. One of the best receivers of the last decade, if not the best, arguably. So gotta put him on there, especially in this great era of receivers. Number 9 is pretty controversial. I got Terrell Owens at 9. I feel like he gets overrated a lot just because he was just a fun personality. I feel like people don't actually know as much about their performance and just know how memorable they are because he was one of the best celebrators ever. I feel like gets overlaid a lot because of stuff like that. Number 8, Antonio Brown has had many off the field issues, but still can't take away how good he was. Chris Carter at 7. Can't really tell you too much about him. Wasn't alive to even see him play, but I know he was a great player. Number 6, Calvin Johnson. I feel like he also gets overrated just a tiny bit, just because he was so freakishly athletic, but he only played 9 years, and I think I got to knock him for that a bit. Number 5, Larry Fitzgerald. Probably the second greatest longevity receiver behind Jerry Rice. He was never really the best receiver in the NFL for a couple years, but he was one of the best for 15 years. Number 3, I got Marvin Harrison. Had the single
Marvin Harrison at 3, even though the only reason why I put him low is because the playoff woes that he had before 06.
I don't like to base off playoffs that much. Not because if you're on a bad team, you don't get the opportunity to play in the playoffs.
Had Peyton Manning in the 2000s was better than Tom Brady.
Agreed, but
he was the best quarterback in the league, arguably the best player in the league, besides, of course, Ray Lewis.
I still think he was up there. I mean, 1,300 catches. He had the single season reception record for 20 years or something like that. I think he's one of the most underrated players ever. Number 3, Steve Largent. He was probably the earliest guy on this list, 70s, 80s guy, but he was probably the best receiver for most of his career. He was extremely productive. His stats aren't all that great, but you have to remember in the 70s it was more common to throw interceptions than touchdowns, so it's a completely different era, and for performing that well, then gotta knock him up. And then number 2, Randy Moss, no surprise there. Number 1, Jerry Rice, no surprise there either.
A lot of people don't know this about Steve Largent. He played most of his career in the 80s with Jerry Rice, actually. He only played about 4 years in the 70s.
Yep.
He a great wide receiver, but to me, like I always say, is a difference between the greatest and the best. But to me, when it comes to wide receivers, it's really hard to rank them based off of certain accolades and championships, because you see Tyreek Hill, one of the, somebody who I would have had on an honorable mention. I just listed in my top 10 quick, but he definitely was an honorable mention. One of the best wide receivers this decade. Probably we want to go on greatness because everybody else is young. He's probably the greatest of this decade. You see that the Chiefs won back-to-back Super Bowls without him. Tom Brady and the New England Patriots won 3. Was a dynasty before Randy Moss. So it's really hard to rank wide receivers based off of accolades and stuff. So to me, that's the only list where you could argue that the best is pretty much
the greatest.
The greatest, or I would say maybe about 80%. Because the only guy you could probably argue should be lower on my list, I feel like, is maybe Michael Irvin, and then maybe Marvin Harrison should be higher. But that's about it. Everybody on my list is a dog.
I didn't have Ocho Cinco on there.
Oh,
I would have had him as a.
He's not even top 20.
I might have had him as an honorable mention, and that's a maybe. But Ocho Cinco was an absolute dog when he was playing.
He's in the Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he's good enough to be in the Hall of Fame.
I think he could be, but he's been retired 15 years. Hasn't gotten inducted yet. There's 30 plus receivers in the Hall of Fame. I don't think you can consider him top 10 if he's not even in it yet.
Yeah,
I think he's gonna go though.
I think he will eventually do.
There's also so many great wide receivers. Like it's OD stack.
What about Art Monk?
Art Monk, Commanders guy in the 80s. Don't know too much about him. I think he's up there. I think he's close to top 10, but don't think I can put him quite there.
Let's see. I think Art Monk for his time, yes. I believe he played for Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Won some Super Bowls. He is a great wide receiver, but I think the guys specifically in the next decade, in the 90s, were just a little bit more individually talented. And I think this is one of the lists where you can really look at individual talent and rank the wide receivers based off individual talent instead of strictly on accolades.
Want to go to quarterbacks next, so since we're already on the topic of passing?
Yes. Ooh, this is going to be very tough. Where would I put Drew Brees? Because I'm talking about the difference between the greatest and the best.
I can go first if you want, unless you want to.
Ooh, I'll go first. I'll give some shout outs and then I'll give one honorable mention. I want